The laughter started with Declan. It was a small, cruel sound, but it cut through the happy chatter of the pack gathering like a knife. He stood across the clearing, his phone raised, and a flash went off. Cassidy's blood ran cold. She knew without a doubt that he had just taken her picture. She had just reached for a lemon bar. A simple, harmless thing, and in an instant, it had become the fuel for their cruelty. The low hum of their ridicule followed her everywhere, but this time it was different. She saw the other wolves pulling out their phones, a frantic whisper of activity spreading through the crowd. She pulled out her own phone, her hands trembling. It was already there. A post on Declan's feed, a picture of her, her face a mask of shame, a cruel caption underneath. #BigBadOmega. But it was the comments that hit her like a physical blow. They weren't just words, they were daggers. Looks like the dessert table one. Is she eating the whole pack's food supply? The only thing missing is a dumpster fire emoji. The comments were a vicious, unending torrent, each one sharper than the last. She saw a meme of her face photoshopped onto a cartoon character, a fork the size of her body in her hand. The humiliation was so complete, so public that it felt like her skin was on fire. This wasn't just a pack joke. Her pain was a viral spectacle. Her world wasn't just collapsing. It was a performance, and the whole world was laughing. Her hands stopped trembling. A cold, hard resolve settled in her heart. She had spent her entire life helping them, healing them in secret, and for what? For her worth to be reduced to a punchline? She looked at her phone, at the meme, and at the comments that were still coming in. This was not her home. Not anymore. With a newfound strength she didn't know she had, she stood up. She took the phone in her hand and, with a force that surprised even her, she threw it to the ground. The screen shattered with a satisfying crunch. She heard the sound of her own freedom. It was a tiny sound, a tiny crack, but it was enough. She walked away from the lights, the laughter, and the world that had mocked her, leaving a path of broken glass and heartbroken tears in her wake. She didn't have a plan, just the desperate need to find somewhere that didn't know her name. Chapter 1. The world had shrunk to nothing but the sound of her own gasping breaths and the pounding of her feet on the asphalt. Cassidy didn't know where she was going. It didn't matter. She was only running from what she had left behind. The laughter, the viral comments, and the face in the meme that was supposed to be her own. The humiliation was a raw, aching wound, and she was so lost in the pain that she didn't hear the low rumble of an engine behind her. A sudden, blinding light filled her vision. A blare of a horn ripped through the silent night. She froze, a deer caught in headlights, her mind too numb to react. The car screeched, tires spitting gravel as it swerved, missing her by inches. She stumbled back, falling onto the cold ground. A door slammed, and a tall figure stormed toward her, silhouetted by the car's brilliant headlights. "What in the hell were you thinking? Are you crazy?" a deep voice barked. He came into view, and Cassidy saw a man with a stern face and dark, worried eyes. He was powerfully built, with wide shoulders and a presence that made the air feel heavy. He smelled of fresh pine and cold steel. He wasn't from her pack or any pack she knew. I'm sorry," she stammered, her voice shaking. He ran a hand through his dark hair, the initial anger in his eyes fading to concern. "Sorry? You almost walked into my truck. Are you hurt?" He took a knee and looked at her. For the first time she saw herself through someone else's eyes. Her face was a mess of dirt and tears, her clothes torn from her fall. He was a complete disaster. She braced herself for the inevitable look of disgust, but it never came. He just looked at her with a quiet understanding, and for a second she felt seen in a way that had nothing to do with her weight. "I'm fine," she whispered, but the lie was so fragile it broke apart in her throat. He gave a small, weary sigh. "You're clearly not. Come on." He held out a strong hand. "My name's Caleb." Cassidy hesitated. Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to run into the trees and disappear. But his hand was warm, and his voice was a calm anchor in a world of chaos. She took it, and his grip was gentle but firm as he helped her to her feet. "Look," he said, gesturing to his black SUV. "I don't know what you're running from, but you're not safe out here. My home is just up the road. You can stay for the night, get some rest, and we can figure things out in the morning." He didn't demand an explanation. He didn't ask her name. He just saw a person in trouble and offered a simple, life-saving kindness. She had no phone, no home, and nowhere to go. She simply nodded, a single word of thanks too difficult to form. The ride was quiet. She sat in the passenger seat, the soft leather a strange luxury. Caleb didn't speak. Instead, he reached over and turned on the radio, and the low, soothing sound of a soft rock song filled the silence. She watched the dark trees blur past, the humiliation from the meme finally giving way to exhaustion. When they arrived at his lodge, Cassidy felt a new wave of panic. The place was immense, a grand structure of stone and dark wood with warm lights spilling from every window. He wasn't just a stranger. He was a wealthy stranger, someone powerful. She felt herself shrinking, a tiny, worthless thing in his grand, beautiful world. He led her inside, and the warmth of a crackling fire instantly filled her. The air smelled of old books and something that reminded her of the woods after a clean rain. "You can use the guest room upstairs. It's the first door on the right," he said. "There are clean clothes and toiletries in the closet. Take your time." And then he was gone, leaving her alone in the quiet, peaceful hall. She stood there for a long moment. The heavy silence in the house was her only comfort. The world felt far away. The memes and the laughter were a distant, hazy nightmare. For the first time in what felt like forever, she was just Cassidy, a girl who was tired, cold, and safe. She went upstairs, pulled a soft t-shirt on, and fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. Chapter 2. Cassidy's eyes fluttered open, a soft, unfamiliar light spilling across the room. She was so used to waking up to the small, cramped room she shared with two other Omegas, a room that smelled faintly of old laundry and unwashed bodies. But here the air was clean and smelled faintly of lavender. She sat up, her mind foggy, and looked around. The room was huge, with tall windows that looked out onto a thick forest. The bed she was in was impossibly soft, and a fluffy white comforter was tucked around her chin. It wasn't her room. It wasn't her life. Panic set in for a split second, a cold fear that this was a trick, a dream. But then she saw the clean clothes neatly folded on the chair, the fresh towel laid out. She remembered the kind eyes of the man who had brought her here. She remembered Caleb. A wave of relief, so strong it made her sigh, washed over her. She was safe. For now. She showered, the hot water washing away the dirt and grime from the night before, and as she wrapped herself in a soft towel, she stared at her reflection in the mirror. She looked different. Her eyes were still red from crying, but a bit of the frantic panic was gone. She put on the clothes Caleb had left out, a soft gray hoodie and a pair of loose sweatpants. They were a little big, but they were clean and comfortable, and she felt a surge of gratitude. When she went downstairs, the lodge was silent. She followed the scent of freshly brewed coffee and pancakes to a large, bright kitchen. Caleb was standing at the stove, his back to her, a spatula in his hand. He was wearing a simple gray t-shirt that stretched across his broad shoulders, and a pair of comfortable-looking jeans. He looked powerful and calm, like a force of nature at rest. "Good morning," he said without turning around. She jumped, startled that he knew she was there. "How did you?" she started but stopped. He was a wolf. He could smell her, feel her presence in the room. Her Omega scent was probably even stronger to him now, more noticeable without the overpowering scent of a pack. "I have good hearing," he said, a small smile playing on his lips as he flipped a pancake. He turned around and offered her a plate. "Sit down. I made extra." Cassidy took the plate, her hands shaking slightly. He hadn't asked for anything, hadn't said anything about payment or work. He just gave. This was a new and terrifying thing for her. She sat at a huge wooden table and watched him as she ate. The pancakes were light and fluffy, and the coffee was warm and strong. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "For everything. The clothes, the food, this place." She gestured around the room. He just shrugged. "It's nothing. You needed help." She wanted to help him. She couldn't just take his kindness and leave. Her Omega instincts, ingrained since birth, were to serve, to earn her place. She put her plate down and stood up. "I can do the dishes," she offered, moving to the sink. "Or, I can clean. I'm a good cleaner. I can take care of the house. I can work for you, anything you want." Caleb's spatula stopped midair. He looked at her, his brows furrowed. "I don't need a maid, Cassidy. You're a guest. You don't need to work for me." Her heart sank. She didn't know how to be a guest. She didn't know how to just take. For her, worth had always been measured in what she could do for others, and his simple refusal felt like a rejection. Her shame was back, a low thrum beneath her skin. I can't just stay here. I have to earn my keep, she insisted, her voice small. He placed the spatula down and walked over to her. He didn't touch her, but his presence was a warm wall in front of her. Cassidy, he said gently, I'm not a pack alpha. I don't have a rigid system of ranks and duties. My home is a sanctuary. No one has to earn their place here. She stared at him, tears welling up in her eyes. The simple words felt like the kindest thing anyone had ever said to her. He wasn't mocking her. He was giving her something she had never had before, unconditional acceptance. Just then the phone on the counter rang, a sharp, loud buzz that made her flinch. She took a step back, her body tensing. Caleb looked at her, confused by her reaction, then looked at his phone. He answered it, and as he spoke she felt a wave of dizziness. She was so tired, so emotionally raw, and the sound of the phone had brought back all the memories of the night before. She put her hand on the counter to steady herself, but her hand slipped on a slick patch of syrup from the pancakes. She felt her feet go out from under her and she flailed her arms, trying to catch herself. Caleb, who was still on the phone, dropped it and moved with the speed of a powerful wolf, his arms catching her just before she hit the floor. He held her close, her face pressed against his chest. Are you okay? He asked with a low and soft voice. He pulled back just enough to look at her, a concerned frown on his face. Cassidy was mortified. She was not only a burden but a clumsy, messy one. Her face was flushed with embarrassment. She mumbled an apology, but he just laughed, a deep, easy sound that was the most beautiful thing she had ever heard. He helped her stand and looked at the puddle of syrup on the floor. See, he said with a grin. I told you I didn't need a cleaner. You just make a bigger mess. Cassidy couldn't help it. A small giggle escaped her lips. The sound was so foreign, so unexpected that it surprised her. He had made a joke about her clumsiness, but his eyes were warm and kind, not filled with a cruel mockery like Declan's. She looked at him, and for the first time she saw a flicker of something more than just concern in his eyes. They cleaned up the mess together. As they worked, she noticed him favoring his left side, a grimace on his face whenever he stretched too far. He tried to hide it, but his movements were stiff, and she could smell the faint scent of old injury and lingering pain. It was a familiar scent to her, the scent of a wound that wasn't fully healed. Her healer instincts stirred, a powerful, protective urge. He straightened up, wincing slightly as he did. He saw her looking at him. It's nothing, he said quickly as if to dismiss her concern. But she knew better. This was a deep, unhealed wound. Her gaze dropped to his arm and she saw the long, jagged scar that she hadn't really noticed before. It was a dark line against his skin, a testament to a past he didn't talk about. You're hurt, she said, her voice soft. He looked away, uncomfortable. It's an old injury. Nothing can be done about it. Cassidy shook her head. Her gift was a part of her, a core part of who she was, and she couldn't ignore the pain she saw in him. Let me help you, she said, her voice full of a new, quiet confidence. I can heal it. I know I can. Chapter 3. Caleb's face was a mixture of surprise and disbelief. He shook his head, a small, dismissive gesture. Cassidy, that's not something you can just fix. It's an old injury. It's a part of me. Nothing is ever completely broken, she said, her voice soft but firm. For the first time, her Omega instincts felt like a source of power, not shame. Her healing gift was a part of who she was, a gift she had always hidden. She wasn't hiding it now. Her eyes, filled with a gentle but fierce determination, met his. Just sit down. Please. He hesitated for a long moment. A man who was used to being in control of every situation, now faced with a tiny woman with a quiet confidence that baffled him. A wry smile touched his lips. I'm a big man, you know. I don't just take orders from anyone. I'm not giving you an order, she replied, a hint of her own playful humor creeping into her voice. I'm making a request. He stared at her for a beat longer, and then, with a heavy sigh that was half frustration and half resignation, he sat down on a stool at the kitchen island. He rolled up the sleeve of his shirt, exposing the ugly, jagged scar that ran from his wrist to his elbow. The skin around it was red and swollen, and she could see the painful way he held his arm, favoring it even when he tried to pretend he wasn't. Cassidy's heart ached for him. She reached out, her fingers trembling slightly, and placed them gently on the scar. The moment she touched him, a powerful energy surged through her. It was a familiar feeling like a dam breaking, but it was also different. This was not a quick patch-up for a broken bone. This was deep. This was old. She closed her eyes and focused, pouring all of her energy into the wound. Her hands began to glow with a faint, silvery light. She could feel the old, tired cells in his body waking up, the torn muscle fibers beginning to knit back together. It felt like she was a part of him, sharing his pain and then slowly soothing it. Caleb gasped, a sharp, surprised intake of breath. He opened his mouth to say something, but no words came out. His body went rigid for a moment and then slowly began to relax. She felt the tension drain out of him, a physical letting go of years of pain. A warm scent, the smell of healing and peace, filled the air around them. The process felt like it went on for an eternity. Her forehead was slick with sweat, and her hands felt heavy, but she didn't stop. The light coming from her hands grew brighter and brighter, until it was almost blinding. She could feel the scar dissolving, fading from a dark, angry line to a faint, silvery whisper. Finally, she pulled her hands away, the light disappearing instantly. She was exhausted, her knees feeling weak, but she looked at his arm and a small, satisfied smile touched her lips. The angry scar was gone. All that was left was a faint, silvery line, barely noticeable. Caleb was staring at his arm in complete and utter shock. He turned it over and over, his fingers tracing the faint line of the scar. He flexed his hand, his eyes wide. A moment of deep, profound silence stretched between them, a stillness that was more powerful than any sound. "How?" he finally whispered, his voice hoarse. "No one has ever. How did you do that?" Cassidy smiled, a genuine, joyful smile. "It's my gift. It's what I do. It's who I am." He looked at her, and his eyes were filled with a kind of awe that she had never seen before. It wasn't a mocking awe or a look of fear. It was a look of pure, unadulterated wonder. "You're a healer," he said, the words a simple statement of fact. "Yes," she said. "But I'm not just a healer. I'm a wolf. An omega." She held her breath, waiting for the disgust, for the inevitable disappointment to set in. But it never came. Instead, a small, genuine laugh escaped his lips. The sound was so unexpected, so full of warmth, that it made her giggle in response. He looked down at his arm again, a new kind of wonder in his eyes. "An omega healer," he said almost to himself. "The pack that lost you is more foolish than I ever imagined." His words, simple as they were, hit her with a powerful emotional force. It was the first time anyone had ever acknowledged her gift and her rank in the same breath, without judgment. He made it sound like a beautiful, rare combination, not a flaw. The initial shock and awe gave way to a quiet, easy silence. He made them both a cup of tea and they sat at the island, sipping the warm liquid. The air was filled with a sense of calm and a growing intimacy. He was no longer just the man who had saved her. She was no longer just the girl he had rescued. They were two people with secrets, sharing a moment of quiet connection. "The scar, it was from my old pack," he said, his voice low and serious. "I was the alpha, but I didn't want to be. Not anymore. I had to leave. My old mate, she wasn't who I thought she was. She was a deceiver. And in the end, a traitor." His words struck a chord in her heart. She knew that kind of pain. The pain of a betrayal from someone you thought you could trust. The pain of being a joke, an outcast, a symbol of something broken. She looked at him and she knew. He wasn't just a powerful alpha. He was a man with a broken heart, a wound that her gift had only started to heal. They sat in silence for a long time, the only sound the quiet ticking of a clock and the gentle rain that had started to fall outside. The trust between them had deepened, a silent, powerful bond forged in a single healing touch. Chapter 4. The silence in the lodge was heavy, a thick, unspoken thing that hung between them. After the healing, the air still felt charged, but with a different kind of energy. It was the energy of a wound not fully closed. Caleb poured them both another cup of tea, his movements slow and deliberate. He wasn't looking at her and she knew why. He was waiting for her to talk. For her to tell him how she, a healer of such power, had ended up alone on the side of a highway. He had shared his pain and now it was her turn. She took a deep breath, the scent of the tea filling her senses. She didn't know where to start. Her whole life had been a series of small humiliations that had built up into one massive, crushing blow. "It wasn't just Declan," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "It was the whole pack. They They treated me like I wasn't even there. Unless they wanted to make a joke. She looked down at her hands, twisting them together. The memory was a fresh, raw wound. My parents told me to just keep my head down. To not cause any trouble. To be a good Omega and be grateful. So that's what I did. Her voice broke, a raw, painful sound. I was a healer. I would sneak out at night to help the young wolves who fell and broke their arms, or the elders who got sick. I would do it in the dark so no one would know. But I thought, maybe if I helped them enough they would finally see me. She looked up at him, tears welling in her eyes, finally seeing the truth of it all. I helped them. Over and over. And they never saw me. Never. A single tear escaped, rolling down her cheek. They only saw the fat girl. The useless one. And that night they finally made it a joke for the whole world. She pulled out her hand and showed him her broken phone, the shattered screen and bent casing a mirror to her soul. She told him about the picture, about the meme, and about how every single person in her pack, even the ones she had secretly helped, had laughed at her. They used my face, she whispered, a sob choking her voice. My face. And they turned it into a punchline. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a joke. I was a meme. The tears came freely now, hot and thick, rolling down her cheeks. I was a joke for the whole internet. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with the force of her pain. Caleb was silent. He just sat there watching her, his own face a mask of profound sorrow. He reached out and gently took her hands, pulling them away from her face. He looked at her, his eyes full of a deep, understanding grief. He reached out and cupped her face, wiping a tear from her cheek with his thumb. The simple gesture felt more powerful than a physical embrace. He closed his eyes and a slow, painful sigh escaped him. I know, he said, his voice a low, choked whisper. I know that feeling. He pulled his own phone from his pocket and a tremor ran through him. He unlocked it, his movements filled with a deep, private pain. He scrolled through a series of old posts and then he turned the screen to her. She saw a picture of a beautiful, smiling woman with long blonde hair, standing beside a much younger, happier Caleb. The caption was short and simple. My alpha is more concerned with his pride than his people. He looked up at her, his eyes glistening. She was my mate. My Luna. Thought she loved me. But she was a snake. She used social media to turn my own pack against me. She would post these small, cruel comments that would poison their minds. They thought I was a bad alpha. They thought I was a monster. His voice cracked and he cleared his throat. I had a fight with a rival alpha. And she told everyone it was because I was weak. She posted a picture of my injury. And she used that to turn my entire pack against me. He looked at his arm, at the barely there silvery line where the scar used to be. A single tear rolled down his cheek and he didn't bother to wipe it away. She was the one who put that scar on my arm, he whispered. She was a master of a different kind of violence. The kind that leaves no marks but can shatter a person from the inside out. They sat in silence for a long time, the only sounds the soft hum of the fireplace and the quiet rhythm of their shared tears. They were two people with broken hearts, two people who had been publicly humiliated. But they weren't alone anymore. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth and silence of the lodge, they found a comfort in each other's presence that was more powerful than any kind of healing. A small, genuine smile touched her lips. I'm still really bad at this, she said, her voice shaky but soft. At a lot of things. Like I'd probably burn this whole place down if you left me in charge of the kitchen. Caleb's quiet sadness broke, a single short laugh escaping him. It wasn't a laugh of mockery but of pure affection. He reached for her hand and squeezed it. I'll get the fire extinguishers ready, he said. They spent the rest of the night in a quiet, intimate silence, their hands clasped together, a silent understanding passing between them. They were no longer a lonely healer and a wounded alpha. They were two people who had found a home in each other, a home built on empathy and a love that was just beginning to bloom. Chapter 5. The peaceful rhythm of their days was shattered by the cold, digital buzz of a world they had tried so hard to leave behind. After their emotional confession, the air in the lodge had settled into a comfortable, quiet kind of love. They cooked together, read by the fire, and simply existed in a way that felt more real than anything they had ever known. But one morning, as Caleb was scrolling through his old network feeds on his laptop, a video caught his eye. The screen showed a scene of chaos and despair he recognized immediately, the territory of Cassidy's old pack. He turned the laptop around, his face etched with a mix of surprise and concern. The video was a shaky, low-quality clip filmed by a young wolf who was clearly terrified. It showed a desperate-looking alpha standing in the center of a sick, groaning crowd. The pack members looked weak and disoriented, their fur matted and their eyes cloudy. The alpha, a man who had once seemed so strong, now looked tired and beaten down, his face pale with worry. His voice, usually so commanding, was shaky. "To any alpha, any healer, anyone who can help us," he said, his eyes scanning the camera with a desperate plea. "A sickness has spread through our pack. It's draining our strength and our healer can do nothing. We are losing our people. We will give anything for a cure." The video had been posted a few hours ago, but it had already gone viral among the various wolf social circles. The comments were a flurry of theories and half-hearted prayers. But what stood out to Cassidy and Caleb was a comment from a former beta in her pack, who had been a little kinder to her. It said, "We had a healer. An Omega. She was the one who was here when the illness first started. But we ran her off." Cassidy's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. It was the illness she had felt spreading through the elders. The sickness she had known she could heal but had been turned away from. Now her pack was paying the price. She turned away from the screen, walking to the large windows, her mind a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Her deeply ingrained Omega instincts, the part of her that was hardwired to serve and to heal, screamed at her to go. To go and help the sick and the tired elders she had loved in secret. But the pain, the raw, fresh pain of betrayal, of the memes and the laughter held her back. The irony was so bitter it almost made her laugh. They had mocked her for her weakness and now they needed her strength. Caleb came and stood beside her, his large frame a warm, comforting presence. He didn't say anything. He just watched her, his silent support a powerful thing. She knew he understood. He knew what it felt like to have your pack turn their back on you. They need me," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "I know," he said quietly. You could tell by the video that they were desperate. They are not hiding anything anymore, the pain is all over the screen. "But they turned on me," she said, her voice full of a raw, broken anger. "They laughed at me. They used me as a punchline. Even the ones I helped." "And you were still worried about them," he stated. It wasn't a question but a simple truth. He saw through her pain to her core, to the part of her that was pure and kind and good. "That's who you are, Cassidy. You're a healer. You can't just turn that off." She turned to face him, tears stinging her eyes. "It's not fair," she said, her voice cracking. "I hate them for what they did. But they are suffering." He reached out and gently cupped her face. "You don't have to forgive them. You don't have to love them. But you are the only one who can help them. And you can't deny who you are just because of who they were." She leaned into his touch, her eyes searching his for a sign, any sign that he would tell her to stay. He didn't. Instead he gave her the one thing she needed more than anything. Her own choice. "Look," he said, a new idea sparking in his eyes. "We can go together. I will come with you. I will make sure they don't disrespect you. You're not going back there alone. We are a team, remember?" She gave a small, shaky laugh, a fragile, hopeful sound. "You'd really go with me? To my old pack? They're going to hate you," she joked, trying to lighten the moment. He smiled, a mischievous glint in his eyes. "I've never been one to be welcomed with open arms. Besides, they will be too focused on how handsome I am to be mad at you." Her heart swelled with love for this man. He was giving her a chance to go back and face her demons, but he was also giving her a safety net. He wasn't telling her what to do, he was telling her she had a choice. "Okay," she said, the word a quiet but firm decision. "We'll go." The rest of the day was filled with a nervous energy. They packed a few things, mostly medical supplies for her and some clothes for both of them. Caleb was quiet and focused, a powerful alpha in his element. He helped her load the car, his movements confident and sure. He saw her fear and in a light-hearted, reassuring gesture he gave her a small, playful pat on the head. "Don't worry," he said with a grin. "It'll be fine. I'll be right there." As they got into the car, Cassidy looked back at the warm, welcoming lodge. It was a home she had found, but she knew she couldn't keep it until she faced the past that had torn her apart. She turned to Caleb and her hands were steady. She was no longer just the lost girl running from her past. She was a woman returning to face it, and she was not alone. Chapter 6. The drive to Cassidy's old pack territory was filled with a quiet tension. The landscape, once a place she called home, now felt like a foreign country. Caleb was a solid, comforting presence beside her, his hand resting on her knee, a silent anchor. As they approached the pack's main gates, a rusty, worn-down sign confirmed their location: Blackwood Pack. The once bustling grounds were now eerily silent. A low, collective moan hung in the air, a sound of profound suffering. Caleb parked his car on the outskirts of the main area, and they got out. The smell of sickness hung in the air, a foul metallic scent that made Cassidy's stomach clench. Pack members were slumped against trees, their eyes cloudy and their bodies trembling. The once bright, energetic pups were lethargic, their parents huddled around them, helpless. Cassidy felt a familiar wave of her old life wash over her, a mix of fear and a powerful, almost painful urge to help. She had seen this sickness before in a single elder, but now it had spread like wildfire. She took a step toward the crowd, and Caleb's hand gently but firmly found her lower back, a signal that he was with her. A young wolf from the pack, seeing a new face, stumbled over to them. His eyes, though glazed with sickness, widened as he looked at Caleb. You're an alpha," he whispered, a mix of awe and fear in his voice. He glanced at Cassidy, a look of confusion on his face. "Is that Cassidy?" Whispers rippled through the crowd as others saw them. The sick, the tired, the hopeless, they all looked up, their eyes widening. These were the people who had laughed at her, who had turned her face into a meme. Their expressions were now a mix of shock and shame. They saw a woman who looked confident, her head held high, and a powerful alpha who stood by her side as if she was the most important person in the world. Then she saw Declan. He was standing with a small group of his friends, looking tired and pale, but still with that arrogant glint in his eyes. He saw her, and for a moment he just stared, his jaw hanging open. He looked from her to Caleb, and a deep scowl settled on his face. "What are you doing here?" Declan sneered, his voice a low, resentful growl. "You ran away. Did you come back for a laugh?" Caleb's grip on Cassidy's back tightened, a silent warning. He was a mountain of a man, his presence a shield against Declan's words. Before she could speak, the alpha of the pack, a tired-looking man with graying hair and worried eyes, emerged from the crowd. He was still a powerful alpha, but the sickness had taken a toll on him. He saw Caleb and dipped his head in a sign of respect. Then he looked at Cassidy. The shame on his face was clear. "Cassidy," he said, his voice raw with a profound sense of loss. I am ashamed. I am so deeply ashamed of how we treated you. My son, we were wrong. You were the only one who saw this sickness coming. And we let our pride chase away the one person who could have saved us." It wasn't a casual apology. It was a formal, deeply heartfelt plea. The alpha bowed his head, a sign of surrender. "Please, Cassidy. Please forgive us. Our pack is dying. We need you." A single tear rolled down Cassidy's cheek. The apology was a form of vindication, a moment she had never dared to dream of. It was everything she had wanted, but it didn't completely heal the pain. It was a start. She looked at Caleb, and he gave her a small, encouraging nod. She then looked at the sick wolves, at the panicked young wolves, and at her parents who were standing in the back, their eyes wide with disbelief. Her old instincts took over. "I'm not doing this for you," she said to the alpha, her voice clear and steady. "I'm doing this for your pack. For the young wolves and the elders. Not for the ones who mocked me." She walked toward the first sick wolf, a small girl huddled on the ground. Caleb walked with her, his presence a silent promise to the pack that she was no longer alone. The pack members were stunned. The girl they had used as a punchline was now their only hope. Cassidy began her work. She moved from wolf to wolf, her hands glowing with a soft, silvery light. She healed the fevers, soothed the pain, and pieced back together the tired, broken cells. Caleb never left her side. As she worked, she felt a new kind of power. It wasn't the power of an alpha, but the quiet strength of a woman who had come home not to fight but to heal. "You are absolutely right. I apologize for missing that crucial detail. It's a key part of the story's emotional climax and the modern, relatable twist we talked about. Thank you for catching that. I will correct this and rewrite Chapter 7 to include the live streaming element. Here is the revised chapter. Chapter 7. The days blurred into one long, grueling push for Cassidy. She worked tirelessly, her hands glowing with her healing energy from sunup to sundown. The sickness was stubborn, a deeply rooted poison that sapped the wolves of their strength and spirit. She moved from the young to elder, her heart aching with every touch, her body pushed to its limits. Caleb was a constant shadow, a silent guardian who brought her water, a warm blanket when the nights grew cold, and a sandwich when she was too exhausted to feed herself. Unbeknownst to her, a small, quiet act was about to change everything. A young wolf, one of the first Cassidy had healed, had been watching her work. He was so moved by the pure, selfless grace of Cassidy's movements that he pulled out his phone and began to live stream. He didn't say a word. He just pointed the camera at Cassidy, a powerful healer who knelt in the dirt, her face streaked with sweat, and gave everything she had to save a pack that had once tormented her. The video went live, a small, quiet feed in a sea of internet noise. But it was impossible to look away. People saw her hands glowing with a soft, silvery light. They saw her tired but determined eyes, and they saw her gentle, caring touch. They saw a woman with a full body not as a punchline, but as a source of immense power and grace. The feed, shared and reshared by a global network of wolf packs and communities, began to get a different kind of comment. Who is she? They said her pack ran her off. She came back to save them anyway. The meme was a lie. She's a freaking angel. The narrative of the Fat Omega meme was gone, completely replaced by a new truth, the healing angel. As Cassidy worked, she noticed the pack members were no longer just looking at her with shame and desperation. They were looking at their phones, a shared gasp rippling through the crowd as they saw their own live stream, their faces reflected in the cruel digital mirror. They saw the comments celebrating her, praising her, and calling them out for their cruelty. The woman they had used for a joke was now a viral sensation for her goodness, and their humiliation was now a public spectacle. Even Declan, standing in the back, saw his own cruel post trending again, but this time with angry, disgusted comments from strangers telling him he was a coward. Later that night, as they sat by a small fire, the alpha approached them, his head bowed. He looked at Cassidy and his eyes were filled with a raw, honest shame. "Cassidy," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I just saw. What you are doing is a miracle. We took you for granted and we made you a spectacle for the world to laugh at. And you came back and you made us a spectacle for the world to witness your goodness." His shoulders slumped with the weight of leadership. "I am ashamed." Cassidy felt a fresh wave of grief and anger. She was tired of the apologies. He just wanted to be done. Caleb, sensing her emotional turmoil, stood up, his voice a low, commanding rumble. "She's exhausted, Alpha. She needs rest. We will resume her work in the morning." The Alpha nodded, accepting Caleb's authority without question. He rose and walked away, and Caleb looked at Cassidy, a concerned frown on his face. He sat down and put his arms around her, pulling her close. She leaned her head against his chest, her body finally allowing itself to relax. "I'm so tired," she whispered, a quiet sob escaping her lips. "I just want to be done. It hurts to be here." "I know," he said, his voice soft and soothing. "But look what you've done. You came back and you're saving them. You're showing them and the whole world who you really are." She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "I'm not a joke anymore," she whispered. He smiled, a profound sense of love and admiration in his eyes. He leaned in and gently kissed her forehead, a quiet promise that he would be there for her, no matter what. As they sat by the fire, a small, mischievous smile touched her lips. "You know," she said, her voice a low, teasing whisper, "I'm pretty sure my mom thought I'd come back home with a husband and babies, not with a half-healed alpha and a bunch of sick wolves." Caleb laughed, a genuine warm sound that filled the night air. He looked at her and his eyes sparkled with a playful glint. "Well," he said, "a girl's gotta start somewhere. Besides, I think I'm a good substitute. And who knows what the future holds for a girl like you." He kissed the top of her head once more and held her close. He was right. She had come back not as the broken Omega but as a woman with a purpose. She had a man who saw her worth, a pack that finally respected her, and a new sense of strength that had nothing to do with her rank. She wasn't just healing the pack, she was healing herself. Chapter 8. The night air was filled with the smell of roasting meat and the quiet chatter of a pack reborn. The sickness was gone, A bad memory that had been chased away by a girl who they had once used as a punchline. The Alpha had declared a celebration, not for a great hunt or a victorious battle, but to honor the woman who had saved them all. The entire pack was gathered in the main clearing, a bonfire roaring in the center, its warm light dancing on the faces of the wolves who now looked at Cassidy with nothing but reverence and awe. She stood near the fire, a new kind of light in her eyes. She wore a simple dress that fit her well, her hair soft and clean, and her entire being radiated a calm power. The whispers around her were no longer of mockery but of wonder. She was no longer just the fat Omega, she was their savior. Caleb stood beside her, his presence a silent, powerful shield. He smiled, a genuine, joyful smile that was just for her. He looked at her and she knew she was home. But a ghost of her past was still present. Declan, the Alpha's son, was on the other side of the fire, watching her with a simmering jealousy that was almost as hot as the flames. He had lost his power in the pack, his popularity now overshadowed by the quiet strength of the woman he had tried to destroy. His initial mocking post, once a source of endless laughs, was now a digital stain on his reputation, a cruel reminder of his foolishness. The Alpha stepped forward, his face etched with pride and a deep sense of gratitude. "Tonight," he announced, his voice carrying over the crowd, "we celebrate a new beginning. We were on the brink of collapse, and we were saved by the selfless acts of a true healer. A true wolf. We were blind to her strength. We were foolish. And we are grateful." He looked at Cassidy, his eyes filled with a raw, honest emotion. "Cassidy, you are the most powerful wolf among us. You are our true hero." A roar of approval erupted from the crowd. The wolves cheered for her, for the woman they had once shunned. It was everything she had wanted, everything she had dreamed of. The vindication was real, a sweet victory that filled her heart with a new sense of worth. But Declan couldn't stand it. He had to have the last word. He pushed through the crowd, his face a mask of rage and resentment. He was no longer the smug Alpha's son. He was a man consumed by jealousy. He pointed a finger at her. "Hero," he sneered, his voice loud enough to silence the crowd. "Don't tell me you've forgotten who she is. She's an Omega. A girl with no rank. No pack. Nothing. She came here because her wolf was weak. She saved us out of a need for validation, not out of kindness. And don't forget she was so pathetic she had to be rescued by this rogue Alpha." He gestured toward Caleb. "She is nothing without him." A low growl rumbled through the crowd. The wolves, who had just celebrated her, looked at her now with uncertainty. Declan's words were a poison, designed to undermine her newfound respect and tear her down in front of everyone. But before anyone could speak, Caleb stepped forward, his eyes burning with a controlled fury. He didn't raise his voice, but his low, commanding tone cut through the air like a knife. He walked right up to Declan, who visibly shrank back from his powerful presence. "You're right," Caleb said, his voice as steady as a rock. "She's a girl with no rank. And she is nothing without me. Just as I am nothing without her." He turned his back on Declan, his gaze locked on Cassidy. He reached out and took her hand in his grip gentle but firm. "You saw her as a weak wolf," he said, his voice carrying over the silent crowd. "You saw her as a joke. But you were wrong." He turned her to face the pack, holding her hand for everyone to see. "You mocked the Omega girl because she was fat," he said, his voice full of a powerful a cappella emotion. "Until she saved your lives. Until she showed you what a true healer looks like. Until she proved that a wolf's worth is not measured by rank or size, but by the love and kindness in her heart. Until she found a mate who would stand beside her and show the entire world how wrong you all were." A collective gasp went through the crowd. Caleb looked at her, a profound love in his eyes. "Cassidy," he said, his voice a low, intimate whisper meant for her alone, "you are my mate. You have always been my fated mate. The universe sent me to save you from a world that wasn't worthy of you." He leaned in and gently kissed her, a moment of pure, cinematic romance. The crowd erupted, not in laughter or jeers, but in a deafening cheer of pure awe and joy. A few feet away, a young wolf, the one who had live-streamed her before, was holding up his phone, his hand shaking with excitement. The entire pack was watching, and the world was watching with them. The video of Caleb's declaration and his kiss went viral faster than the meme ever did. The comments were no longer of mockery but of love and celebration. The Fat Omega meme, was gone forever, replaced by a love story that would be told for generations. Cassidy looked at Caleb, tears streaming down her face, and smiled. She had returned to her old life to face a past that haunted her. But she had found a new future with a man who saw her not for her flaws, but for her heart. She was a healer. She was a survivor. And she was finally truly home. To anyone out there who has ever mocked someone for their differences, remember this. The person you see as a punchline might be a healer in disguise. The person you laugh at might be more powerful, more kind, and more worthy of love than you can ever imagine. True strength isn't about tearing others down. It's about building them up. The only thing you prove by being cruel is your own weakness. But it's never too late to change your story. The only way to move past that is with empathy, compassion, and a willingness to see the beauty in everyone. We've reached the end of this journey, but the story doesn't have to end here. I want to hear what you thought about it. Did it make you cry? Did it make you laugh? Did you fall in love with Cassidy and Caleb just like I did? Drop a comment down below and let me know your thoughts. And if you want to see more stories like this one, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and allows me to create more stories that you will love.